This is the story of the 2009 peace agreement between the Congolese government and the National Congress for the Defense of the People, CNDP. A deal that was meant to end years of bloodshed, but instead unleashed one of the most destructive rebellions in recent history, the M23. Stick around because by the end of this video, you'll not only understand what went wrong, we'll uncover the truth behind why the 2009 peace agreement failed, how it led to the M23 rebellion, and the powerful forces at play, military, political, and international, that shaped its tragic outcome. Let's start with the basics. The 2009 peace agreement was signed on March 23, 2009, between the Congolese government and the CNDP, a rebel group led by Laurent Nkunda. The agreement was hailed as a breakthrough, with both sides committing to end hostilities and work toward lasting peace. But here's the question. Why did the CNDP, a group that once seemed unstoppable, agree to sign this peace deal? And why did it ultimately fail to bring peace? To answer these questions, we need to look at the forces that pushed the CNDP to the negotiating table and the flaws in the agreement itself. The CNDP emerged in 2006 as a formidable rebel group led by Laurent Nkunda, a charismatic but controversial figure.
They were asking for talks, and maybe if Kabila can accept, it will be the end of the war.
The group claimed to protect the Tutsi minority in eastern DRC from persecution and marginalization. For years, the CNDP waged a fierce campaign against the Congolese government, gaining control over large swaths of territory. But by 2009, the tide began to turn. A combination of military pressure, political negotiations, and international mediation pushed the CNDP to the negotiating table. Let's break down each of these factors. 1. Military pressure. The CNDP was strong, but it wasn't invincible. By 2009, the group faced significant military pressure from two key players, the Congolese army, known as the FARDC, and the United Nations peacekeeping forces, known as MONUC, later MONUSCO. In January 2009, a joint military operation by the DRC and Rwanda targeted CNDP strongholds, weakening its position and forcing it to consider negotiations. This operation was a turning point. For the first time, the CNDP realized that it couldn't rely solely on military strength to achieve its goals. But here's the twist. Why did Rwanda, a country that had historically supported the CNDP, join forces with the DRC to weaken the group? The answer lies in the shifting geopolitical landscape of the region. Second, regional and international mediation. Rwanda had long been a key supporter of the CNDP due to its shared ethnic ties with the Tutsi community in eastern DRC. But by 2009, Rwanda's priorities began to change. Facing international pressure and seeking to improve its relations with the DRC, Rwanda withdrew its support for the CNDP and even participated in joint military operations against the group. At the same time, international actors like the United Nations, the African Union, and Western countries were pushing for a peaceful resolution to the conflict in eastern DRC. The humanitarian toll of the conflict, widespread displacement, sexual violence, and child soldier recruitment had drawn global attention, and the international community was eager to see an end to the violence. This combination of regional and international pressure created a powerful incentive for the CNDP to negotiate. But there was another factor at play: internal divisions within the group itself. Third, internal divisions and leadership changes. In January 2009, Laurent Nkunda, the charismatic leader of the CNDP, was arrested by Rwandan authorities. His arrest marked a turning point for the group. Nkunda was replaced by Bosco Ntaganda, a controversial figure known as the Terminator, who was more willing to negotiate with the Congolese government. But Ntaganda's leadership didn't resolve the internal divisions within the CNDP. Disagreements over strategy, leadership, and the group's future direction created tension and weakened its cohesion. These divisions made it harder for the CNDP to sustain its military campaign and increased the pressure to seek a negotiated settlement. Fourth, political concessions. The Congolese government, recognizing the strength of the CNDP, offered a series of political concessions to bring the group to the negotiating table. These concessions included the integration of CNDP fighters into the National Army, the FARDC, and promises of greater political representation for the Tutsi community and other marginalized groups in eastern DRC. For the CNDP, these concessions represented an opportunity to achieve its goals through political means rather than armed struggle. The group saw the peace agreements as a way to secure a place at the table and address the grievances of the Tutsi minority. But here's the twist. While the peace agreements marked the end of the CNDP as a rebel group, they also set the stage for the emergence of a new rebellion, the M23. The failures of the 2009 peace agreement created the conditions for the M23 to rise just a few years later. Now that we understand why the CNDP signed the agreement, let's examine its key provisions and why they failed to deliver lasting peace. Each provision was designed to address a specific aspect of the conflict, but poor implementation and unresolved grievances ultimately undermined the entire process. 1. Integration of CNDP forces into the National Army, FARDC. One of the most critical provisions was the integration of CNDP military and police units into the FARDC. On paper, this made sense. By bringing former rebels into the National Army, the government hoped to unify the country's security forces and reduce the risk of future rebellions. But the integration process was poorly managed. Many former CNDP fighters felt marginalized, underpaid, and mistreated by the government. This fueled discontent and created a pool of disgruntled soldiers who were ripe for recruitment by a new rebel group, the M23. 2. Amnesty for CNDP members. The agreement also included an amnesty for CNDP members for actions committed between June 2003 and the date of the agreement. While this was meant to encourage reconciliation, it failed to address deeper grievances, such as ethnic tensions and the marginalization of the Tutsi community. This oversight allowed the M23 to frame itself as a defender of the Tutsi minority, tapping into unresolved ethnic grievances to justify its rebellion. 3. Transformation of CNDP into a political party. The agreement called for the CNDP to transform into a political party and participate in the political life of the DRC. However, this provision was never fully realized. Many former CNDP leaders felt excluded from meaningful political participation, leading to frustration and disillusionment. This sense of exclusion played a key role in the rise of the M23, as leaders like Bosco Ntaganda saw the rebellion as a way to regain power and influence. 4. Return of refugees and displaced persons. The agreement emphasized the rapid return of refugees and internally displaced persons, IDPs, to their homes. However, the return process was poorly managed, leading to further displacement and insecurity. Land disputes and a lack of security for returnees exacerbated tensions, creating a volatile environment that the M23 was able to exploit. 5. Reform of the Army and Security Services. The agreement called for the reform of the Army and Security Services, but these reforms were either delayed or inadequately implemented. The result was a weak and fragmented national army that struggled to maintain control over the eastern DRC. This created an opportunity for the M23 to establish itself as a dominant military force in the region. 6. Economic reforms and resource management. The agreement highlighted the need for economic reforms, including better management of natural resources. However, these reforms were not effectively implemented. The continued exploitation of natural resources in eastern DRC fueled conflict, with armed groups like the M23 vying for control over mining areas and trade routes. 7. Lack of effective monitoring and implementation. Finally, the agreement established national and international monitoring committees to oversee its implementation. But these mechanisms were weak and lacked enforcement power. As a result, many provisions of the agreement were never implemented, leading to widespread disillusionment. The M23 used this failure as a justification for its rebellion, arguing that the government had broken its promises. The story of the 2009 peace agreement is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that peace is not just about signing agreements, it's about addressing the root causes of conflict, implementing meaningful reforms, and ensuring that all parties are held accountable. Thank you for watching JB Mwangi Podcast. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can shine a light on the stories that matter.